Well, thank you so much for coming. It's a pleasure to see everybody here. And I'm Mark Levin with the Texas Public Policy Foundation and Right on Crime. And thank you all for coming to today's luncheon. I am delighted to see that we've got a great crowd, including even the head of juvenile justice in Kentucky, Hassan Davis, who's with us. And we're delighted to be working with folks in Kentucky as they look to move forward in some of the same ways Texas has to improve their juvenile justice system. And so it is a real pleasure to stand here because of the national recognition that Texas has gotten over the last few years. As we've seen our juvenile incarcerated population sharply decline, at the same time our juvenile crime rate continues to decline as well. And so as many of you know, we've gone from over 5,000 youths in state youth lockups here in Texas back in 2006 to just about 1,500 today. So it's a pretty dramatic change. And we've also, at the same time, and it's important we continue to focus on strengthening the community-based programs that both hold youths accountable and put them on the right track, work with their families, work with victims, and make sure that we do both improve public safety and have these youths be productive, law-abiding citizens for years to come. So as we head into this legislative session, we want to, of course, continue and build upon the progress that's been made. And I think there's several areas that really stand out as being particularly areas that we can focus on, one being the budget, to make sure we continue to prioritize the community-based programs. Number two, I think looking more in detail at the outcomes of some of whether it's post-adjudication facilities or non-secure facilities, to try to make sure we're prioritizing funding towards those that have not only the outcome of reducing recidivism, but also some of the positive outcomes of youth subsequently being successful in terms of education, entering the workforce, paying restitution, and so forth. And then and that involves also making sure we have the right performance measures in place. And then also looking at reentry and parole. One of the aspects is we've seen the number of commitments to our state youth lockups rise. Even though the number of revocations and parole does not increase, it's just by default become a greater percentage of those coming in, now about a quarter of those coming in. So fortunately, there's some interesting models like the CARE program, the wraparound program in San Antonio that went into place, Parenting Without Limits, and others that we can look to for a more holistic approach to parole and reentry that can potentially more than pay for itself by reducing new offenses and eradications for both technical violations and new offenses. And then finally, I think you're going to see a major focus this session, some significant legislation surrounding reforming the zero tolerance policies and school discipline. There's been a few good bills adopted over the last couple of sessions, but I think you're going to see a much larger proposal this session that will really, I think, hopefully slow the flow of youth into our juvenile justice system for very minor misbehavior, really improve the early intervention efforts within the school so that we can both have better discipline, more order within the school, but also a less reliance on the juvenile justice system.
Being a CPA and a finance person at our agency, while I can often give some commentary about how I see some of that as an individual, my real role here today is to speak to you from the financial and technology perspective. And to that, let me get started with a few facts and figures. Some of you are certainly very familiar with these, but I think it's really important to lay that as a foundation. The state currently operates 6 secure facilities. That is fewer than it had over the last decade. It is down to 6 now. We also operate 9 halfway houses, roughly equivalent to non-secure facilities for youth in transition back to their community. Now, that being what the state actually operates, let's give you some figures of what the counties are operating, because what I get to speak to today here as the finance person is facts and figures of a unified juvenile justice system. Last session, a significant bill passed, SB 653, and created the Juvenile Justice Department. So my information and some of the numbers I'll work with you from here are numbers that relate to the entire system. That being both what the counties are involved in as well as what's involved at the state level. The counties operate 53 secure facilities. state operates 6, the counties operate 53. Of those 53, 33 of them are for pre or detention only purposes. I mean, post purposes, excuse me. 53, if a facility is dual certified, they can use them to hold youth in a secure setting until they are adjudicated in some form or another. Of those 53, 33 of them actually can retain youth in there after they've been adjudicated for a certain amount of time as the courts may decide an agreement has been worked out. I think it's also added on to that the counties actually operate 11 non-secure facilities, roughly equivalent to the 11 halfway houses in the state does. However, that is a very small percentage of the non-secure placements that our youth are in after they've been adjudicated. There are literally over 100, maybe even 120 places that our youth are sent to that has a bed where they may stay for anywhere from a week to many months. In fact, there are some specialized places out of the state that certain counties have decided to place their non-secure youth to receive specialized care. I believe one of them is in Iowa, just as an example. So the 11 are just the 11 non-secure places that the counties operate themselves and are a governmental facility. All right, with that aside, let me give you a couple of more things that have been going on since the merger. A couple of more things that are going on in the merger is we have had some challenges with working with more difficult youth. And those more difficult youth have presented a number of challenges to which the Juvenile Justice Department has created a new internal program called Phoenix, to which you must go through quite a few procedures and processes before those youth can be placed in a specialized area within our Waco area facility. And we call that the Phoenix program. There's a lot of specialized due diligence with it. I'm not the exact expert, but I think it's important fact here to know that we have set aside 24 beds, they're not all occupied right now, for the Phoenix program to work with our most difficult youth who have had some youth on youth problems, youth on staff, some other difficulties. So we have taken a step up to deal with these more difficult youth. We're proud to tell folks that a couple of the youth who have gone to the Phoenix program have graduated, so to speak, from there. A couple of them are working very hard at getting their GED even while they're in the Phoenix program. And this is a good sign that we're making a lot of improvements in the educational functions that are going on in the Juvenile Justice Department. However, I think there's a couple more facts that we ought to lay out, and some of these are going to be available in a number of publications that you all can look at. Actually, I should probably pause right there at this moment. Friday was a due date for what we call as our December report. It's required by a rider in the General Appropriations Act. You're all welcome to pull it up. It's on the front page of our website. If you look further in the publications area of our website, you can find a similar report for 2010 and 2011. But the 2012 is hot off the press. It was finished on Friday, delivered to the governor's office and the LBB as prescribed, and it's been placed on our website yesterday for you to look at. It's got a great deal of information in there about what's been going on in the last year, and it even compares some of the information to several of the years before. A couple of the things I wanted to bring out to everybody was that the facts are we are dealing with more violent children within the actual juvenile justice system. We're dealing with less children, but more violent, and clearly those who have greater mental health difficulties. let me give you a couple of facts. In 2007, 43% had a previous or current violent felony before they became a part of the juvenile justice state facility. Now, 59% of them. So we are seeing an increase. And if I go down this list, those who have had prior referrals, it used to be that about 5,000 of them had prior referrals. Now we've got over 6,000 of them have prior referrals. So it's just a couple of factoids that we are working with more violent youth at the state facility. I think I mentioned something about the mental health needs. The juveniles that are on supervision anywhere in the juvenile justice system, now we are seeing that 34.8% of them have a significant mental health need, a medium to significant health need. I talked to you about the violent rate. I think as a CFO, it's my responsibility to put forward in this room some of the key things that our agency has requested the legislature to examine for additional funding. We've recently come from a board meeting where they re-reviewed our acceptable items and actually endorsed a few additions to them. The first one that they endorsed a addition to is the need for safety and security expenditures within the state facility. That we need to hire some higher expertise officers to handle the more difficult needs. And the board even went further and said, not only do we need about 37 more, we really should get about 50 more senior officers, very expert officers, to handle what we call as our redirect program and to work in our Phoenix program to work with our more difficult youth. And so we're asking the legislature to support us in that regard. The second major area that we've recently put in some additional requests to the legislature is for bond money. Of the 6 permanent facilities that the state now has, they are in need of some important repairs, but they are also in need of what Executive Director Mike Griffiths calls is some vocational improvements. We want the youth who are in the facilities to receive as much vocational education as possible. And some of these 6 facilities do not have the proper buildings, structures, rooms, hardcore equipment that is needed to give these youth vocational training that meets today's marketplace. Whether that is something as simple as advanced carpentry, advanced automotive skills, the same with welding, even computer skills. And so we need some additional bond money that we're putting in front of the legislature to help with our vocational facilities. The next major one is that they boiled through all the counties that we work with. They feel it is absolutely crucial that some more mental health funds be provided to the counties. And we have asked for $7.6 million to help, actually that per year, to fund mental health programs in the counties. It would be to help with some of those main 53 facilities so that they could have a higher capacity of mental health professionals there. But it's also to help the small and medium-sized counties be able to hire mental health professionals by the hour to address the youth before they become fully involved deeper in the juvenile justice system. And nearly every single county would come forward and tell you that this is a critical need for them. I think I'll close by saying that the Juvenile Justice Department has gone from roughly $700 million a year in expenditures in 2007 to what is now about $330 million a year in expenditures. So the state has done a lot to make changes in how juvenile justice works and is paid for. But at the same time over that period, the counties have sustained their level of funding and actually have increased it. I can report that the information to us on 2012, which just closed at the end of August, that $376 million was spent at the county level with county-based funds to work with the juvenile justice system, the juvenile justice case that we're talking about.
The concern from probation departments or from counties has been, from the very inception of the idea of Senate Bill 653, that we would get lost, that counties wouldn't be represented, that funding wouldn't continue, and that kids wouldn't get served. And I'm happy to say today, I think that's not the case. I want to tell you just a little bit about one of the things that we're doing in Williamson County that I think is really a neat and unique idea. The Research Institute out of Minneapolis, Minnesota has a program, it's really a service philosophy called 40 Developmental Assets. And that's what we adopted about 2 years ago. And all of our programs and services are focused on that. It's really a strengths-based approach of serving youth. And I think what we end up doing is we have a lot of assessments and we figure out what all is going wrong with kids. But we never focus on the positive and try to enhance and increase those positive things. You do have to deal with the negative. And you have to look beyond the offense, as we were talking earlier in the conference room. I think historically, people look at a kid committed burglary of a car or habitation, something like that, and probation's job was to get them on paper and get them off paper, so to speak, as they would say in the old days. And now it's really to look beyond that offense and what's leading to this behavior and what's going on with it. I'd like to say that TJJD and Bill here, Bill touts himself as a finance man, a numbers man, but he really has a heart for kids. And I would say that that's something that has continued through this transition and hasn't been easy. That's been a rough year or so with some transition turmoil. But I think we're headed in the right way. I think everybody who has been at the helm had their heart and mind in the right direction and has kept focused moving forward. We'd like to put a plug in for motivational interviewing. That's something that's going on in the adult system. Just a process for working with youth, with clients, and trying to figure out what the issues are that they're dealing with. I think TJJD has really made some strong moves with regard to their assuring accountability, quality, consistency, and transparency. They've put in programs like aggression replacement training, functional family therapy. Those are new ideas. I think they're wonderful. I think that it warms my heart to see so many advocates for youth, and they're not all just juvenile probation folks. Not many. I see a couple of juvenile probation folks here in the room, juvenile services folks, but there are just a lot of people who have a heart for what's going on with young people. And I think that as funding continues, this may not be a popular idea, but I believe in it, and so I want to say it. I think that there need to be collaborative incentives, whether it's with prevention, whether juvenile services is going to administer that, or whether it's school districts or DFPRS, whoever it's going to be. There needs to be incentives to have everybody at the table and to the best approach to dealing with prevention, early intervention for youth. I came prepared today to answer questions more than to give a talk. So I think I'll leave it with that. I would say that grant aid, which is state aid, I would like to see that continue to stay at the same amount that we receive each year. I think that, again, I don't want to reiterate too much, but I think that's what allows us to be creative, allows us to do some things that it'd be really tough to sit at the Commissioner's Court and try to explain and try to get them to support with local taxpayer dollars. Grant C, which is our commitment reduction. In Williamson County, we opened bills talking about our own residential programs diversion from the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, State Institutions Division. It's really we handle, process and work with and treat kids with sex offenses and we take some general offenses as well, kids with mental health issues. In Williamson County, we've been really blessed to have a strong mental health support. My assistant chief, Matt Smith, is here today. One of the first things I did after being in the business for 20 years before when I became chief was I realized that there needs to be a focus on mental health services. And so we hired a licensed professional counselor, made him our assistant chief, and has not disappointed me so far. He's done some really neat things.
So when we answer questions about whether the merger has been successful, the main question I want to know is successful at what? What was the merger intended to accomplish? And I think there are a lot of people out there with very different goals for the merger. And if you ask them if the merger has worked, it's sort of like the tale of the blind man touching the elephant. It depends which part of the elephant you're touching, how you'll describe it. So with that little preface, let me just walk through some of the different ways you would describe this elephant. Was the merger successful at streamlining governmental functions and saving money? Probably yes, but there are people on the panel who talk about that a lot better than I can. Did the merger allow for better communication and coordination of the various functions of the juvenile justice system? I think so. There seems to be a great deal of interaction between county-level juvenile probation departments and TJJD. That seems to be going pretty well. Has the merger allowed for continued emphasis on county-level juvenile probation programs and de-incarceration of the state-level secure facilities? I think there continues to be a very strong emphasis on diverting more youth to county-level facilities, to programs and services at the county level, to investing in those, and trying to depopulate state facilities. That seems pretty clear to me. The population of TJJD is down. It's lower than it was at the start of the merger. And TJJD is showing itself to be very open to creative thinking on the part of the counties about ways to further increase diversion and even to bypass TJJD altogether for some youth. So the last question I want to talk about is, has the merger resulted in better outcomes for youth? And I think the jury is still out on this measure. For starters, one question is which youth? For those youth who've been diverted to county level probation, presumably this can be considered an improved outcome compared to incarceration, although I think we still do need to see the results of those programs in terms of recidivism and such. But for those youth who are still in TJJD's secure facilities, as Bill was talking about, it's really hard to see any improvement in their experiences. Youth-on-youth violence is continuing to be occurring at shockingly high levels in the facilities. Youth-on-staff assaults are also very high. Youth are cycling in and out of security, which is a short-term form of solitary confinement with stunning frequency. Use of pepper spray is unacceptably high. So yes, the agency as a whole has depopulated, but the facilities remain very large. They're roughly the same size as they always were. They're large. And that means that the experiences of the youth at the facilities has not changed appreciably from the way it was before the merger. If the merger was supposed to bring us to a place that was much closer to the reform experiences of other states, where we have smaller, more regional, intensely therapeutic facilities that manage the very small core of juvenile offenders who are too serious to be kept at the county level, then no, I think we're still pretty far from reaching that goal. And the current talk about closing additional facilities isn't going to bring us a whole lot closer to that goal, unless we have some creative thinking about how else these currently incarcerated youth can be managed. By any standard, TJJD has had an immensely challenging year. 3 turnovers of leadership, staffing reorganizations, budget cuts, closed facilities, staffing shortages at the facilities, highly publicized problems of violence and disturbances in the secure facilities. At the very least, those issues have been a distraction, and they haven't really allowed the agency to focus the way it needs to on how to achieve those long-term goals, including the reinvention of juvenile incarceration as we currently know in Texas. I'm not sure there's a person alive who could have, quote, fixed TJJD in the span of a year, given how ingrained some of those issues were, and how they mitigated against any easy solutions to the problems. So I believe it's important to be forward-looking. We need to not just question the effectiveness of the merger, but also figure out where do we want to go from here. What kind of juvenile justice system are we looking to achieve? And I feel pretty confident that the answer has very little to do with what name is on the door of the agency. So as we move into the next legislative session, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to seek ways to accomplish the following things. First is increasing safety at TJJD's secure facilities. There are a lot of ways that this is not an easy task. There's a lot of things that need to happen. And I'll just mention a few of them. Improving staffing practices, for example, not having vacant positions, filling those positions, proper deployment of staff, making sure the dorms are appropriately staffed, improving training for staff. We need better classification of youth, ensuring that they're housed in settings that are commensurate with the risk that they present to the juveniles. Creating cool-off rooms, and by that I don't mean security, where youth can go instead of becoming aggressive. We need better gang management. We need to do a better job of teaching staff how to enhance their de-escalation techniques and early intervention so that assaultive behavior is prevented rather than having to be responded to. We need to improve the system of rewards and consequences that we have in the facilities, coming up with more immediate responses to troubling behavior. And we need better management of youth with mental illness. There's no question that that's a serious concern. So one, increasing safety at the secure facilities. The second thing that I'm hoping that we can focus on is increasing opportunities for youth to be served effectively at the county level. And by that I mean not just shifting responsibility to the counties for these needs, but helping the counties come up with more creative opportunities and ways of serving youth. Increasing funding for local programs. More creative thinking about allowing well-equipped local probation departments to essentially opt out of or bypass TJJD. Encouraging regional cooperation that increases opportunities for rural counties. Third area, not just depopulating the facilities, we need to do more than that. We need to reimagine what secure facilities are going to be like in the future. We need secure facilities, don't get me wrong. They should remain facilities that are run by the state juvenile justice agency, but there's always going to need to be somewhere where we can place the truly unmanageable and dangerous youth, where they can receive intensive treatment that's unavailable at the local level. But all the research out there shows that these services are best provided in very small facilities, under 30 beds. So closing facilities alone is not going to get us where we need to be. All that does is concentrate the most dangerous offenders in a single facility and eliminate some options for administrators to manage those youth by moving them to other settings. We need a system comprised of small regional facilities, some run by the state, some run by the counties, all of them intensely therapeutic, focused on the eventual reentry of that youth to the community. The real value of the merger, as I see it, would be lying with the ability to make that all happen. The coordination and the cooperation of the counties and the state, a true partnership to serve all the youth in Texas. And finally, the last focus would be the increased focus on prevention and early intervention initiatives, which was already mentioned. That's going to require dedicated funding, and it's going to require a shift in thinking on the part of many juvenile probation departments to deal with youth who are not yet in the system.
I just want to thank everybody that's on the juvenile justice team. And I want to tell them that definitely the legislature has a lot of work. And when I talk about the juvenile justice team, I'm talking about families, pastors, community leaders, teachers, coaches. They're all part of the juvenile justice team. And we had to make some decisions, budget-wise last session that probably impacted a lot of those individuals' way they conduct their business. But such is life. Sometimes decisions have to be made. Now it's our opportunity to go back next session and come up with some new ideas and some new approaches. This whole juvenile justice, let me just begin by saying I didn't ask didn't request to be on the Committee on Corrections. I don't even think it was on my choice. But it's become to be a very interesting situation. And let me tell you why. It kind of reminds me of being back in the Army. You got to get to go on a lot of field trips and go visit places. And one place I went to visit was Pulaski. Obviously, it's an adult facility. And You know, this is a real serious situation when we're talking about juvenile justice. Because when I was touring that facility, and let me just back up here. Before I was elected, I was a high school football coach, basketball coach, along with a government economics teacher. And this young man came up to me and said, "Don't you remember?" And I said, and obviously I did immediately remember him. This was one of my former football players. Obviously, I did remember he was involved in our juvenile justice system at that time. I don't know what happened between 99 and now, but apparently his juvenile justice experience, and not trying to disparage anybody, but apparently that has ended up in our adult situation. So these are real life situations, these figures and facts that we're looking at are real situations. Senate Bill 653, I think you brought up some good points, Doc. I remember sitting in one of the working sessions. At one point, we thought we would drag this process out of merging these two agencies. Then someone came up with the idea, and I agreed with it. We might as well just go ahead and get it on, and hurry up and get the merger on. We shorten that time span. If there's, bad news is not like wine and cheese, it'll get better with age. So if there was some bad news out here, let's just go ahead. Obviously, when you look at any type of policy, you have to look at the environment that it was framed and structured in. In 2011, the stress and the political environment was to cut. And this merger gave us the opportunity to answer some political questions and also meet some budgetary concerns. Now, the objective of the agency was pretty simple: to establish a cost-effective continuum of youth services that emphasizes keeping youth in their home communities while balancing the interests of rehabilitative needs with our public safety. So with that, looking at the, is the merger successful? I think the doctor did a good job of saying that obviously if you go from 2 to 1, that's decreasing the scope of government potentially. Yeah, it's successful. Listening to some of the statistics that Mr. Monroe has brought up about what we were spending in the past versus now, you would say it's successful. But as a school teacher, I would say we won't really know until maybe a decade or so, when we look at the kids' lives that we've touched, or they, like my former football player, transferred on into the adult system, or are they actually being the productive members of society that we know and expect that they can be. Mr. Monroe is definitely correct. The work was more difficult youth by being a freshman, sort of transitioning into maybe a real senior sophomore. He had a lot of turnover. Seems what happened is we had a fortunate situation where our counties were extremely successful in working with our children and our youth at the local level. And so those that could not be handled at the local level, they were sent on to the secure facilities, to the state facilities, and these tended to be the ones that needed just a little bit more attention. Obviously, we have decreased the number of facilities, so you have more of the tougher situations in fewer places. So obviously, you're going to have some concerns. Being a former infantry officer, I would say absolutely right. You have to have security first. There are a lot of good ideas about programming, and we need to look at those as the legislature. We need to look at those in the field. But first, we got to get a handle on this. And I tell you, I do a lot of field trips, and one cold January day earlier this year, I went to get this. And I think I got the 5-star tour, because I didn't see a whole lot of stuff that was in the newspapers. So I don't know what that was about. Then I started reading all this stuff in the newspapers. It was pretty placid the day I was there. But needless to say, we need to get control of these facilities. We need to make sure that they're safe and they're secure. And not only in our state secure facilities, but even in some of our public education facilities, we do need to improve our vocational settings, and that will require some resources. The mental health. This is something that my juvenile chiefs have pounded and pounded and pounded along with different advocacy groups. For some reason, we have some gaps when it comes to juvenile mental health. Somehow you kind of have to do something really, really bad before we go into action. We need to correct that. What we do know is that when we do get aggressive with providing programs, mental health, intense mental health services, we do reduce the rearrest rate. We talked about the decreases in state expenditures. Also being a member of the Committee on County Affairs, I don't see any people from the counties in here. None raise their hands, but when you say that there's been a decrease in state expenditures but an increase in county expenditures, we don't know what that means. It could mean we're engaging in state unfunded mandates. Obviously, I campaign on not doing that. Chairman Coleman and County Affairs say we don't do state unfunded mandates anymore, so I want to make sure that we're not being involved in passing off costs to the local level. You can be rest assured, Chief, I will not forget the counties for a lot of reasons. I have 5 counties. That means I have 5 county judges, 5 sets of county commissioners, 4 juvenile chiefs. And not so much the counties, but I'm glad you brought up the idea about our rural counties. And Texas is a big state, it's a diverse state. One size fits all doesn't necessarily apply. So whatever programs or ideas that you bring to us, I'll definitely be looking at it through a rural lens.
One of the challenges we've seen over the years is interface between the juvenile system and other systems that touch these youths, whether it's the school system, child welfare, mental health. And so we've seen some shortcomings in areas such as information sharing. Also just kind of a basic thing, if you've got a caseworker for the child welfare system who goes to the house and checks out certain things, does certain assessments, can there be a way for the juvenile probation caseworker to then see through the computer or whatever that those assessments were done a couple days ago, so I don't need to go today. That sort of thing where we could get some efficiencies. So, and then we've also seen, I think schools and the child welfare system be somewhat reluctant to share certain information with the Juvenile Justice Department. So I want to see if any of you might address how we can improve in this area.
One thing I could, okay, so one issue that, or one idea that a lot of places are starting to move is having what are called crossover dockets between kids who are in both the CPS system and the juvenile justice system, where they have one judge, one set of professionals working on these cases. It streamlines the services available to them, and I think that's a model that is being tested around the country with great success. Travis County has a model like that. It's certainly good for the exploration.
I think this whole transition, we're in the infancy stage, and I think we've got the juvenile case management system, which we'll look at from a technical standpoint, that has the capacity in the future to involve all agencies. In our county right now, Williams County just now making that transition from caseworker over to JCMS, and so we're optimistic about that, and the goal is being able to include and involve other agencies. And I just think in general, again, I go back to my thought of collaboration. We've got to have a mindset that we've got to bring everybody to the table who has a vested interest in trying to help them. And I think that would help.
If I could add something, Mark, obviously we need a collaborative, integrated approach. I believe SB 653 did offer some opportunities for these various agencies and everyone that has a best interest in that child being successful. One thing I did bring up in the opening remarks, sort of related to this, I know there's been a lot of discussion about discretionary discipline procedures in our public schools. And there's a concern that the way we're disciplining in our public schools is not uniform, and it could actually be leading to more placements or involvement in the juvenile justice system. Still reading that research, and kind of skeptical for these reasons here. Being a former school teacher, we're subject to the control of our school boards. Our school boards or local community groups. I, for one, believe that local communities should have a level of discretion in determining community standards. I understand maybe in Dallas, a young man wearing an earring may not be a discipline action, but in Woodville, Texas, it will be a discipline action where I talk. But be as it may. But I will tell you this, details matter and the small things count. We need to be smart in our school districts on how we discipline our students. But also at the same time, if you don't stay on top of the little things, then you will have some very bad things happening, and you will have our young people going into the juvenile justice system. So I think it's a fabulous piece of research. I think it's a very clever piece of research, but I'm still sort of guarded and kicking down the door and probably, doing more, telling school districts more of what to do out in Austin.
Sure. Well, I think one of the interesting things that kind of brings along with the whole broken windows policing thing, which you saw in New York City, and at the same time that was implemented, Rikers Island, their jail population went way down because they enforced things like, graffiti and jumping subway turnstiles. They didn't send them to jail, but they dealt with them. So you're absolutely right. You don't want to ignore the minor disciplinary things and just let them pile up. Do you want to see if there's any questions here in the audience as we go forward here? Otherwise, Mike, do you have any comment? Okay, that's it.
Mr. Monroe mentioned the vocational training and getting bond money, state bond money to do that. Has the agency looked at working with private sector who has problems with welding courses? There's a number of members working on vocational and technical education legislation. Have they thought of working that angle and getting private companies to help pay for that instead of the state, who needs the welders or the HVAC people, carpenters, et cetera?
If I could give you a general scenario about the plan that we have placed out there for consideration at this time, would be that the state help with bonds to put the correct kind of facility within our secure facilities behind the fence. Unfortunately, a number of the private folks who we want to partner with, the youth are not permitted to be out there in the community at the welding shop over there across town. We are expecting that when we do have higher grade vocational programs, that we will be partnering with the private sector to bring their staff, their expertise to the campus. And I'm sure that that's going to help it out in a financial sense. There are several programs that I've heard about, and I'm certainly not the expert, where we have had to discontinue because we could not find a way for the youth to work within the correct safety concerns and protocols. So really the only funding we're looking for here is to give the correct building and core equipment on campus to then do this partnering with the private entities, whether it be automobile, building trades, and all.
Okay, then as a follow-up, then do you, or will you, before getting bonds out and building these facilities, have some type of MOU with them so that you know that you are going to have people in there to do the training as opposed to an empty building?
We'll certainly survey what's out there, and I know that there are a number that we have had, and we should do the same thing again. I think you're making good sense. To survey and to find out who can actually make use of them. We do believe that there are a number of places, both at our Giddings facility and at Evans are two prime examples.
I guess I would direct this to either Mr. Matthew or Representative White. In your ideal world, what would you do on the prevention side to deal with children who have mental health issues? Apparently that does something to drive them into the criminal justice system. Are there things you would like to see in communities or in schools that would better address mental health before it gets that far?
For Representative White, start off with.
Well, you'll probably come up with the idea, and then I'll have to come up with later.
Okay. I think there were a lot of education cuts in the last legislative session that really impacted, when you got right down to it, school districts were more focused on, we've got to get kids in education. You know, mental health stuff's going to have to come from somewhere else. And so a lot of counselors are left. So I think that to replace those counselors, but I think also to have, again, I go back to collaboration. If we can get the local mental health authority, the school districts, the juvenile services department, child protective services, everybody together and kind of pitch in and try to figure out, like, with a memorandum of understanding how we're going to serve the needs of these kids. I think that would be the best use of our dollars. I think on a local level, probation department, there are many kids that come into the juvenile detention center. It's very sad that they come into the juvenile detention center not because of the offense that they committed, but because of the mental health issues that can't be addressed, and that's the only way to get them into the system. So I think if we could do some funding at the front end for diversion, have some mental health folks working on the front end, we can assess these kids and figure out what their needs are and divert them from the juvenile detention center altogether. That would be the best case scenario.
Yeah, and this is, he's exactly right. This is the feedback I'm getting from my juvenile chiefs back home is earlier than later on getting the mental health services engaged with the child. I have a chief says she just doesn't have the capacity or the knowledge to deal with some of the situations that come, and she does have, come into her facility, and she does have a small facility, but it's just maybe a week or two that you just can't provide all the services that you know this child needs. So pretty much earlier than later, what I'm hearing from my chiefs.
Could I just follow up? Does anyone want to address the issue? You know, there's been a lot of standing challenges, of course, in Canada, which is the primary facility for mentally ill use, with finding qualified psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists to work there, given the fact that it's, you know, far from any major medical center. And so there's been, you know, as you suggested, Michelle, we could look at group homes like the Houston area, where you have some of the most mental health practitioners in any place in the country. And so has there been any discussion, and I know there was some discussion in counties, some counties collaborating on a separate facility?
Yes, I've had chiefs come to me with very, a lot of interest that I serve. Juvenile chiefs seem to always have a plan ready to go. And one concept was, especially in my area, we have a lot of rural counties, and if they could pool together resources and have not another facility where we would have children for weeks or months, but something intermediary where they could get they can start getting counseling, if need be, maybe some type of meds, and you could start that process, but you can pool these resources. And I don't want to go too much out on the limb, because definitely dealing with children is different. But I know in my part of Texas, in southeast Texas, we have the Burke Mental Health Center. They have employed very successfully the use of telemedicine, where they can type in on screen a psychiatrist and a psychologist, because even though southeast Texas is a very beautiful place, you can't get psychiatrists to move. So these are some of the ideas that some of the chiefs are coming up with, and hopefully I'll be able to sit down with some of our advocacy groups and really see how the monies that we're using now, and maybe some additional monies, or some of these concepts really achieve.
So we've got another question right here.
Hi.
One of the intentions behind the merger was from the understanding that eventually youth come back to the counties. So I'm curious for Mr. Matthew and perhaps Professor Deitch for any feedback on how you're seeing youth who are coming back, who've been sent to state facilities now, any changes that you're seeing, whether in the type of treatment they're getting, specialized treatment, their preparedness for return or, re-entry. I know, I'm understanding it's only been a year, whether coordination is improving between, TJGD, state staff, and your folks at the county level when youth return.
I don't have a great deal of insight into that. Williamson County has historically not sent very many kids to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. I think our target last year was 11, and so I don't know. I don't have any insight on that. I think that one of the things that may still be on the table, and I'm going to speak out of turn, Juvenile Probation Department is picking up parole. I know that that's being contracted in some cases, and that maybe that could create cost savings, and we would be back involved. In Williamson County, we don't do parole, but it would be very much something we would be interested in talking about.
I don't have any insights to add to that, but I absolutely agree with you. That is one of the outcomes that we would want to see.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting questions that people always think of is if a kid comes back out from the Juvenile Justice Department and now the parole officer might be the same who was a probation officer who got fed up and revoked them. But, I think that in some cases there's a benefit to continuity, in some cases maybe there isn't. But in general, the idea that we could get some savings by not having parole offices when we're also having a probation office, I think one of the things we envisioned as we worked on the merger was that there could be some benefits from consolidating those functions. So, of course, both probation and parole cost a lot less per youth than lockup, so we're not talking about enormous amount of money in that context. Again, by comparison, but still some efficiency gains perhaps that are available there.